Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we're going to look at one that I'm sure I'm going to get some people commenting that it's actually not that bad, or they've got a special config for it that makes it pretty good. But honestly, even playing around with the numbers and everything, there's very few ways of making an assassin something that is, well, more than a disappointment. It was originally set up as a disappointment. Honestly, Maltex really just dropped it and hoped to cash in. And even during the Succession War, it wasn't used all that much until the very end of the Third Succession War, where, well, you didn't really have a choice but to use the mechs that you had. Really, originally, it was more of a Free Worlds League machine. They were the ones who had bought the most originally from Maltex. But over the years and more recently, you will see quite a few different Kaplan versions of it. And I would say the recent Kaplan versions of it are probably the least worst of the bunch. But even there, I'm not a huge fan of most of the setups that they've done. You will see a few different body kits throughout this video, and you will wonder why some of them have the cockpit at the top and some of them have it in the nose. Well, there's been a lot of work trying to make the cockpit of an assassin not terrible, and it never really worked. So that's another problem with this machine. So let's get into it. I would say that the assassin is a legendary design, and really not in a good way. You've got a few different 40-ton mechs that are quite subpar and that fell in that particular category because of the SLDF military procurement system. You have the Clint as well that is also kind of in this category, but for different reasons, mostly because it was shoddily built from the get-go, while the assassin was basically built on a lie. The SLDF procurement didn't really need the assassin to begin with, but really it was the sheer thirst for battle mechs from the great houses at the end of the Third Succession War which brought it back to the front. Any mech is better than no mech is really a thing that is personified in a lot of the 40-ton mechs, and this particular Scout Hunter was originally built to be a replacement for the Wasp and the Stinger, but making it crazy expensive and not super conducive for piloting and all sorts of other issues, and made it quite problematic. Maltex had been building the very successful Thug since about 2572 and had been providing the Hegemony Armed Forces with a very solid PPC delivery platform. The Thug is one of my favorite assault mech in its particular category. It's not maybe the best mech ever, and some people might not love it as much as I do, but I think it performs remarkably well in quite a few different situations. They further expanded their deliveries to the SLDF over time with a city-fighting medium mech, which was called the Wyvern. This one is not super well known. Not a whole lot of people really have been using it over the years. I did do a video on that a long time ago now, but it's quite a decent little thing. Solid procurement contract ensured that money kept coming in and that Maltex could keep expanding their operations and trying new things, but the executive really decided that they needed to corner a new market after a big market analysis. Bergen and Earthworks were making tons of money off of Scouts, and Maltex didn't like that. They wanted to make a whole lot of money off of Scout. The problem is nobody was really asking for a new medium mech or even a new Scout within the SLDF or any of the member states. There was already the new Mongoose that was tested and deployed, and people really liked it. So how do you go around that and try to sell a new medium mech that is supposed to be used as a Scout? Well, it didn't really matter. In the search for more money, they had a basic chassis and an idea, which was basically, let's make tons of money and try to undercut our competitors. So in the end, the Assassin was sold on promises and on performance reviews done by paid shills rather than actual production reasons. The costs were kept down using only standard parts, but everything was billed as having more advanced part and more advanced equipment of the day. Quality control was kept to a minimum in order to ensure maximum revenues, and things started going bad when the design didn't quite match the promised specs that these shills were pushing, and when some of the employees started dying when they were building them. So the SLDF adds some questions for Maltex, who went around them by giving copious amounts of money to the right people and being nice to some of the bigger elites in the SLDF's military. The SLDF did buy a couple hundreds of them, and the Free Worlds League military was happy to finance Maltex's little expedition by buying quite a few of them as well. Over time, though, pilots developed scoliosis because of how awful the cockpit assembly is on the Assassin, and it basically served in garrisons and didn't see much combat in a machine that was, well, not suited to do quite as much as it needed. Even with the production originally starting in 2676, the first major engagement where Assassins took part was in the Third Succession War during a minor fight between the Federated Suns and the Free Worlds League, which basically tells you just how underperforming this machine was compared to just about everything else at the time. Even with the decent enough performance of the Assassin in that particular fight, it would really remained only into use if the Free Worlds League military and the Kaplan Confederation armed forces. The first because they had a whole bunch of them, and the second one because they didn't really have a choice as to what they could muster. In 3025, the CCAF had actually run out of Assassin, even though it was easy to repair and it was a design that could be fixed using, well, more or less standard parts, and it was rugged enough that you could keep it running. It was easier to replace it with simpler, more common machines like their Vindicators. Defiance did build quite a few during the FedCom civil wars, and it just didn't catch on there either. It just goes to show that the model already had poisoned the well. The final group who started building the darn thing was Hellespont Mechwarrior, who started building them around 3067 under license from Maltex. Even there, they were starting to use more advanced materials and some of the very fancy equipment of the time, and the new ASN 99 was still subpar compared to other machines of that particular era, at least from what a lot of analysts say. A lot of them were still sold to various members of the Tripartite Alliance with the Kaplan Confederation, Taurians, and Canopians, with the Taurians basically having to buy them because the Kaplan said so, and the Canopians buying them because they trusted Sun Tzu Liao and his glorious vision. That means that there's quite a few assassins in my general neck of the woods, even though I'm not one to tell people to buy it, basically. So let's look at the base specs for an Assassin. It has one of the worst cockpits of any mechs, and the standard one is the one protruding in front of it. And I mean, it's a standard chassis. It uses standard armor and standard equipment, so it's nothing fancy. So it could easily be used and fixed during the Succession War. It does use a massive, for a mech its size, Vox 280 to give a speed of about 118 kilometers per hour, which is quite fast. And you get a full suite of LOX Lift Series 1 jump jets, giving you 210 meters of jump range, which is one of the most mobile mech in that particular category of the time. You really have to go see some of the more modern machines with XL engines and fancier bits and bobs to get something faster. Or I would say the Ost Scout and the Spider is a little bit more mobile than this. But those have either lower weaponry setup than the Assassin or are a little bit more dedicated. All this investment does mean that it only has 4.5 tons of armor, which is not quite a lot, and you get 10 heat sinks, which sounds like enough on paper, but with that many jump jets, it's still going to be tight. You can basically shoot your medium laser and jump at the same time before your heat starts spiking and you start going out of control. The Assassin is meant to be a scout and a scout hunter, and it was armed in that particular way. Well, even there, I would say that it's quite lightly armed, even in that particular category. Your main gun is a Martel medium laser and an arm cannon mount, which is really easy to replace and really easy to work with. Martels are probably the best medium lasers in that category. Each side torso mounts an Ollie missile launcher, another easy part to get and to replace, with a 5 rack of LRMs on one side and a 2 tube of SRMs on the other. At the time of release and during the Succession War, your options for specialty ammo on both of those things were quite limited. But on more modern versions of the thing, let's say, You could probably load thunder ammos in the LRM so you can drop minefields down the field. Smoke rounds were always available, and the 2-tube of SRM can carry Infernos or my personal favorite, tandem rounds. So it does have some use in more modern settings. But really, here's the kicker. This wasn't what Maltex originally sold to the Star League, at least not on the original bill of procurement. There is a super assassin, well, at least that's what I like to call it, that was never produced or even sold. It exists on paperwork in a file somewhere on Terra, which I managed to dig up when I visited a little while back, and in the Maltex headquarters. So this thing does exist in the ether. Maybe someday someone will build it. I doubt it, but it is out there. You get 5.5 tons of ferrofibrous plates, which is quite decent on a thing that's meant to be a scout hunter at that point, and you use a 280 XL engine and double heat sinks, which makes it quite expensive, but allows you to save quite a bit of space and allows you to, fire weapons and jump at the same time. This one was also very fancy because it used a Beagle active probe and a Guardian ECM, which were quite rare at the time, but were meant to be used on mostly vehicles, actually, and then integrated into various mechs. And your main gun, rather than a medium laser, was meant to be an ER large laser, which would give you a decent amount of punch at a very good range, making this particular version of the Assassin probably the best one out there. But like I said, this thing was never even put into production. It's what was promised to be put in production. And, just stood around, and they started selling the cheaper one instead at the same price as the big one. With the Assassin pretty much being left unused during most of the Succession War for various reasons, the first real variant came out of House Davion with the ASN 101. Someone wanted a little bit more firepower on the Assassin, decided that stripping jump jets and half a ton of armor sounded like a good idea. By saving 1.5 tons, what they did was add 3 small lasers to the design, 1 on each hip and 1 on the head. Officially, 3 of those were built, and we don't really know if any others have been built over the years. It was a custom job. But I've seen them pop up over the years in various videos and various things. So I guess more than 3 were built, and more than 3 were lost. There is also a periphery kit for the Assassin, which came out in the late Succession War era, probably around 3025, 3030, with the ASN 25. This one removes the missile launchers completely and adds a battle claw to the arm without the laser in order to give you some extra crunching action. A mech that fast with some melee weapon is actually not a bad idea. Since you do save a little bit more on weight anyways, you add 1/2 ton of plates, which is useful once again, and you have an extra medium and small lasers in place of the 2 missile launchers. Probably one of the things that people should look at and try to emulate and upgrade Assassins to. I've got nobody working on the particular design here, and I haven't seen anybody in the Taurian or Canopian space working on this either. Even with the rediscovery of the Elm's memory core, satisfaction with the Assassin was still not very high. There's an upgrade kit which came into production in 3067, the ASN 23, but the kit itself became available around 3050. So if you add an Assassin, you could basically refit it to the 23 configuration with a little bit of elbow work. They removed the SRM2, while the medium laser is upgraded to a medium pulse laser. Somewhat. It is good on a fast mech like that. You're going to be able to get where you need to be. Even though the medium pulse laser has a shorter range, you're going to be able to punch things with it. And you're going to be able to shoot things that are quite fast, which is pretty good. The other upgrade is that the 5 rack of LRM now has an Artemis guidance system, which is a really minimal upgrade. It's not worth it, in my opinion. You will see a number of them with ferrofibrous plates, but those are not standard kits. Basically, people got the Assassin, it got beat up, they stripped the plates off of it, and basically cast a new set or 3D printed, that's basically how ferrofibrous worked, plates to put on the mech. Gives you about 14% more protection compared to a regular Assassin, which is enough to make a difference. And there's no additional major cost on a design like that outside of a few couple thousand C-bills, which is worth it when you're dealing with a mech. Later on, Defiance started experimenting on the Assassin in the early 3050s with some more modern technology, and they released the ASN-26. The design uses an endosteel chassis and a 280 XL to save as much weight as possible, and the engine is now loaded with double heat sinks, which don't take any extra room on the inside because they're all mounted in the engine directly. Your weapon loadout is revamped with a pair of medium pulse laser, one in the arm and one in the torso, and you also get an Ultra 5 class autocannon with a single ton of reload, which gives you some long-range support. This basically turns the Assassin into a faster jumping Hermes, and I'm not sure it really was worth it. I'm not a huge fan of that particular design. The Ultra AC5 just doesn't do the job. Maybe a large laser would have been better. Medium pulse lasers, you know my opinion on those. But on a mech this fast, it's usable. I'm not 100% sure what Defiance was thinking outside of, well, let's sell more ultra autocannons and put big engines and things to make money. That new 26 model sold quite poorly. In 3062, Defiance tried again with the ASM-30, hoping to increase the survivability of the machine by replacing the XL engine with one of their brand new light engine. They still use the same endosteel chassis, but they replaced the Ultra AC5 with an LB5X, allowing you to do a little bit more variation, let's say, in design. Since you do lose some weight and space here, you replace the medium laser with an ER medium laser and you keep only one of them, but you still toughen up the armor by 2 tons. You will see some with ferrofibrous armor on top of it, but once again, it's something that was done by people getting the machine and modifying it most of the time. It never made the final cut in the decisions at Defiance for some odd reason, and even there, that particular design sold rather terribly. Hellespont started building the ASN-23 in 3067, and this was a standard kit rather than an upgrade kit, so you had brand new assassins coming out of factories. But their brand new design itself came out in 3068 with the ASN-99. The one big change on this is that it uses 8 tons of stealth armor with an accompanying EM system to give it extra protection and a fairly nice ability to dodge shots just because it's hard to see. The head now mounts a tag to guide artillery and semi-guided LRMs, which is very nice, and the laser is upgraded to an ER medium laser, which were quite common at the time. Each side torso has 2 tubes of SRM, and this is backed up by a regular sword, because the people in the Capellan Confederation really liked sword at the time. Do you see some equipped with triple strength myomer? Yes, you will. Was it a good idea? Absolutely not. But still, they do exist in all sorts of version. Your most recent version came out in 3149 as the ASN-109, and it uses parts from the Raven 2 in order to simplify deployment and procurement. It uses the stealth armor with a more powerful Angel ECM mounted in the head now, because you make up some room by turning the cockpit from an awful regular cockpit to a regular small cockpit. It'll be cramped once again, but at least you save on some weight rather than not. The main gun is replaced with a light PPC, giving you a decent amount of range, and your main missile launcher is a 5-rack tube of MML with 2 tons of reload, protected by Case 2. It'll give you pretty much the same kind of performance as your regular assassin, but in a single weapon instead of 2 separate weapons. You do have an iOS SRM2 on the other side in order to give you a one-time shot of tandem air rounds or inferno rounds. Really depends on what they decide to mount, but I think it's a bad idea. I would probably have used that weight on something else. We have heard rumors that the Endurians are also trying to buy a 109, or at least their own configuration of the 109, using heavy ferrofibrous armor rather than stealth in order to save on some weight. The Endurians have been using C3 computers as well a little bit more recently, so they replaced the Angel ECM with a C3 slave unit in the head. And to basically make things a little bit more aggressive, you get an MML5 on each side, giving you quite a bit of punch at short range with those SRMs and a decent amount of utility at long range with the LRMs. The laser, well, PPC, is replaced with a medium X-pulse laser, which is quite reasonable. It's not a fancy gun in any shape or form nowadays, but it'll give you basically medium laser range with accuracy from a pulse laser. So if that thing gets into production for the Endurians, it might be good, but I've heard that the relations between the Aus Liao and the Aus Humphreys have been going downhill recently. The assassin has been suffering from poor PR from the very beginning, and I really understand why. Current production version of it are quite specialized and really hard to acquire outside of the Capellan Confederation, meaning that they're probably not going to be your first pick if you're a mercenary commander. Could we probably do something with those Defiance model? Well, possibly, but there's really no political, corporate, or military will to really experiment on any of those designs because, well, they've got their own mechs that they can work on and try to upgrade instead. The assassin is just one of those things that is floating in various inventories, floating in the production sales chart, and people get them because, well, they just drop on their lap. Who knows where this is going to go? I'm sure, like I said, that someone's going to tell me that they know a particular version of the assassin that they built or someone built in the boonies, and that is quite good. But really, what we've got for production is usually subpar. So I thank you very much for listening for me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.